Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Has everybody got something to drink? Everybody has taken their selfies? Are you all good? Waiting for a few more people to come in. And there will probably be people coming in during the course of the afternoon, but we'll allow them to do that. My name is Anne-Marie de Beer. I'm heading up the Nestlé Nutrition Institute Africa, and just by a show of hands, who are registered on the Institute website? Oh, a lot. It's definitely more than the Eastern Cape. I can tell you categorically you're winning. For those that are not registered, on the back of your notebook, there's a little thing, QR code. I give you permission to take your phone out now and quickly scan that code so that you can register on the website, because apart from today's information that will be on the website very soon, there's a whole host of information, not just on pediatric nutrition, but really nutrition information from the cradle to the grave. So we look at old people, we look at sick people, we look at children, we look at men, by example, and women separately. So please do yourself a favor and use the website. Also, we have a CPD program on the website. For those of you that are being audited at the moment, I hope there's none of you. There is 30 CPD points available in a year, of which normally 6 are for ethics. So please make use of the opportunity of using the NNIA website and, of course, the CPD program. For those of you that wonders what I'm talking about when I say NNIA, it's not NINIA, because we hear that often. It is the Nestlé Nutrition Institute Africa. And the Institute is really the scientific arm of what Nestlé does. And what we really do, and our purpose and our vision, is to build the understanding of the science of nutrition amongst health professionals. The Institute is only for health professionals, and it's there for you guys. So you can be a pediatrician, you can be a surgeon, you can be a dietitian, you can be a nurse. There's information that is going to be of value for you. We know also, in our country at least, and many parts of Africa, that nutrition training for other health professionals are pretty limited. If you're not a dietitian and you did 4 years of training within pediatrics, it is rather limited. Celeste, you may fight with me afterwards. But nutrition training, generally speaking, is really limited. And for that reason, we believe we've got a role to play in your lives to make sure that we improve the nutrition knowledge. And just something to keep in mind, when I studied nutrition information, the half-life was 5 years. We couldn't use articles that was older than 5 years, because that's when nutrition information changed. That half-life is now 6 months. So you need to be on top of things all the time. Otherwise, you're going to be falling behind and perhaps not know of changes that are happening. So for that reason, and we really pride ourselves in that the Institute provides you the latest nutrition information. So you don't have to go far. You don't have to go and definitely not Google search, but you can do a PubMed search, but you don't have to do that either. You can come to the Institute. Good. That's now my bit on the Institute. Just quickly, just for everybody's notice, we are streaming today's event. We had over 50 people on the call a few minutes ago, so I'm sure they will also come back. So when you ask questions later on, please make sure that you have a microphone. Otherwise, the people online are not going to hear you. Then it gives me really a lot of pleasure welcoming you, the delegates, today. Very often we have these functions. I must tell you, this is probably the biggest function we've had in 5 years. So well done. Thank you. I think you can give you all a round of applause. Well done for coming out. For some of you, it is 2 days by car or by horse or by something. For others, it's just around the corner. But thank you very much for taking the time out this afternoon to be with us. Also, just want to make sure that you all sign the CPD register. If you don't sign it, you're not going to get CPD points. So please make sure that that register is signed. And then, if I may ask, and please, if you want to keep your name badge, you are most welcome. But if you are going to throw it away when you get home, or it's going to lie in the car, please just leave it on the tables for us, and then we that way we prevent landfill. Well, a little bit. It's our contribution to not having plastic in the landfill, but just leave it there. We can really use it again. But if you want to use it, you're most welcome to keep it. Good. That was now my long story. We, of course, have a very eloquent speaker here with us today, and I just need to get my phone right here. And Dr. Holm, who's sitting over there, you actually have a pediatrician in the audience today that heard you at PMG and is back here today, wants to know more. So, but I think that should tell you something about the speech or the talk that you're going to hear a bit later on. But just a bit more about Dr. Holm. Through thousands of consultations with children, adolescents and their families, he has established a framework for the evaluation, communication and diagnoses and long-term management of childhood obesity. The chronic care obesity managed method, the Holbaek method or model that Dr. Holm has developed, constitutes a real and present paradigm shift in obesity understanding, communication and treatment. In more than 150 peer-reviewed scientific papers, of which 30 was specifically on the Holbaek model, have shown that in clinical results across different healthcare sectors, the reduction in the degree of obesity, fat mass, as well as improvements in hypertension, lipid and glucose metabolism, fatty liver disease, sleep apnea, physical activity, appetite, quality of life, self-esteem, bullying, and their own body acceptance. So I think there's a lot of things here that plays a big role there. These results are independent of the social class of the groups, the degree of obesity, genetic risk scores for obesity, disturbed eating, and it showed concomitant weight loss amongst parents as well. So it's got a secondary effect, which I think is really something for us to consider if we look at our whole profile in our country. The Children Obesity Clinic in Holbaek, Denmark, has since been appointed as a European Centre of Obesity Management, where Dr. Holm has been sharing knowledge with other centres of management and been involved in training very many health professionals. Dr. Holm is currently the head consultant in pediatrics. He is the associate professor, head and founder of the Children's Obesity Clinic and the European Centre of Obesity Management. He is also the head and founder of the Holbaek Study Department, which you're going to hear more about, or of the Holbaek Study. He's at the Department of Pediatrics at the Holbaek University Hospital in Holbaek, Denmark. Prof. Holm, you're most welcome. I don't know whether we call him Prof or Doctor. He likes Doctor, I think. So here we like Prof, but Dr. Prof. is Jens Christian Holm. Please join us on stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much for this very eloquent presentation. And thank you very much for inviting me here to come down here to Southern Africa, which I really endear. I think it's a great opportunity. And you have a lot of obstacles and challenges that I'm highly interested in. My vision, approximately 30 years ago, at the same time when I started out to be a pediatrician, my future work was pretty quickly to get into taking care of children living with obesity the same way we do with any other child with any other chronic disease. When you have children with any other chronic disease, leukemia, asthma, epilepsy, congenital heart disease, whatever, it is obviously that we try to take care of them. There's no question to ask. I want the same standards for children living with obesity. I want the same respect, care, seriousness, and professionalism in terms of children living with obesity. Actually, that is the ground for everything I'm going to say today. I made a PhD in fat mass regulation, which actually gave me deep insights in how the neurophysiological of fat mass behaves in various circumstances. I built the Children's Obesity Clinic, thank you very much, Anne-Marie, which is now a center of European management. And I made the Holbaek study, who has now included nearly 10,000 children with and without obesity, where we right now are publishing papers. Within the last 5-6 months, we have published in Nature Genetics, Nature Medicine, Nature Metabolism. We have another one coming in Nature Medicine. We are going into Cell, and 3 times in Lancet. So I think it speaks for itself. A scientific rigor, a scientific level, and a scientific vision in order to portray and enlighten what is going on about children living with obesity and related complications. I have a few disclosures to say. 1948, a long time ago, nearly 100 years ago, 1948, WHO that we all like to cite and respect and acknowledge. 1948, WHO declared obesity as a disease. Let's try to remember that one. 1948, obesity as a disease. 2014, where it get pushed on, the American Medical Association declared obesity as a disease. And they said themselves, this is a monumental day in healthcare where we declare obesity as a disease. Why? Because the connotations are obviously very, very comprehensive. Canadian Medical Association, the year after, 2015, obesity declared as a disease. European Commission, 2021, obesity is a chronic disease. So when you understand obesity as a disease, it's much easier said than understood or taking the consequences from. When obesity is a disease, it actually makes us as healthcare professionals prioritize obesity as any other disease, according to the Hippocratic Oath. We need to take care, we need to diagnose, we need to treat, we need to follow up, we need to take care of obesity the same way we do with any other chronic disease. The healthcare professional is responsible for the treatment of all diseases according to the Hippocratic Oath. We have the competence as well as the patient has the disease. And those are 2 very different things. This understanding, and in daily clinical practice, it has thousands of implications. If you really understand obesity as a disease, then you will not answer like that. You will obviously answer like that, as you already do in diabetes, as you already do in all the other diseases, because then you know what to answer. The problem is obesity is so ridden by cultural narratives, so people get insecure, hesitant, and what are we going to say here? That's the whole point. The next 10 minutes is, in my point of view, maybe some of the most interesting I'm going to tell you today, because it's going to highlight, it's going to make very certain how the things are in terms of fat mass regulation, how fat mass is behaving in various scenarios. This is a Siberian tiger. It's extraordinarily cold. It's up to minus 60 degrees Celsius in the winter, minus 60 degrees, which means that it's pretty difficult to survive in. The animal has preferable 3 survival strategies. The wolves goes in packs, goes around the snow, follow the deer in the tracks of the deer. And if they get the deer, they will have something to eat and they will survive. If they do not get the deer, maybe the deer will survive, but what do the wolves then do? What they do is they're going to eat their pups when it's going to be extreme enough. For several weeks, no prey, eat their pups. The rhetorical question is, would they like to eat their pups? Certainly no, but they do it anyway. Why? Because of signaling strength in the brain. The bear goes after salmon and berries, deposit 40, 50, 60 kilograms of fat mass within the body, goes into a cave, hibernate, and that is really a smart way to abolish minus 60 degrees Celsius. The birds migrate, most of them, not all of them, most of them go to northern Africa, swamps, spa-like conditions, catching frogs. Really ingenious. Getting away from there. too cold. So what is minus 60 degrees? That is really, really cold. What does it mean? Any human, any animal species need to have fat mass to burn in order to keep temperature, otherwise you die immediately. I'm speaking about a system who is hundreds of millions years of age. I'm actually speaking about a system who's billion years of age, because the first bacteria arising approximately 4 billion years ago, they must have had a system where they could coordinate, administer the energy resources so they can reproduce and survive certain strenuous experiences, obviously. So we're speaking about a billion-year biological system which is developed in order to maintain fat mass, which means energy. Fat mass is really important. Fat-soluble vitamins, essential fatty acids. You need fatty acids. You need fat in the brain. You need it in the nervous, in our nerves and all that. There's a lot of ways we really need the fat mass. So it is very important in us to function normally. And if you do not have any fat mass, you're going to be really sick, as in lipodystrophies. So fat mass is really important, and it's actually a foundation of health. This study I'm going to show about is about mice. The mice to your left is a normal mice weighing 25 grams. The mice to your right is a mice with a high degree of fat mass. It's a DB, diabetic, or OB, obese, two different mice, two different mutations in the same pathway. The DB is weighing 125 grams, 5 times as much as the normal mice. Coleman, 1978, makes some very interesting cross-circulation experiments. He opened the stomach of both eyes, sewed them together, and shared their bloodstream. They anastomized their bloodstream, so they now shared circulation, like Siamese twins. The disease you can see to your left, that's the phenotype. These OBDB mice were nearly inseparable. They were extraordinarily hungry, and when I mean extraordinarily hungry, I'm meaning eating 16, 17, 18, 19 hours per day, sleeping 4, 5, 6 hours, eating again. Eating nonstop in all awake hours. Why? Because they were extraordinarily hungry. High fat mass, insulin resistant, impaired growth, hypothermic, hyperactive, stressed, high cortisol, low metabolism, and immune incompetent was the phenotype. The first time I saw it, I thought, oh my God, this is complex. But actually, it's simple. Why is it simple? Because this is the phenotype of animals, human beings, going into severe starvation. When you go into severe starvation, then you start to lock down all your physiological functions in order to use less energy, in order to preserve fat mass, in order to burn it a little later to survive the Siberian tiger. That is the principle. So what Coleman did here was, in the bottom panel, he combined the OB with the wild-type mice. They were sharing circulation, and what happened was that the OB mice with that phenotype to the left was normalized relatively quickly, and Coleman said there's coming a satiety factor from the normal mice going into the OB mice where everything is normalized. One factor, 1978. The two top panels is actually where it really happens. That is the DB with the normal mice, which is cross-circulated, and the DB with the OB which is also cross-circulated. What happens now is very different. These two mice are sewn together. They are being in a cage. The DB mice is eating 16, 17, 18, 9 hours per day, that close to the feeding station. But since they are sewn together, its companion is within centimeters of the food. Still, both the normal mice at the top and the OB mice at the middle do not eat anything more until they starve to death. Coleman said there's coming so much starvation, so much satiety factor from the DB mice into the brain of the top normal, the middle OB mice, so they sense there's a lot of energy in my body. I do not need to eat anymore. I stop eating until I die of starvation. I'm speaking about really, really hardcore signaling strength within the brain that governs the behavior of people, animals living with obesity. That's what I'm speaking about. And these experiments show it very clearly. And they also show it very clearly to what extent physiology is ready to go to preserve fat mass. The same mechanism is shown in the latter two next studies. This is another study. You have a blue line representing a normal mice being born at the first day and then being 21 days after 3 weeks. So due to a short generation of time, this is normal growth and development for mice, the blue line. 100% energy intake, everything is normal. Blue is normal. Normal birth, normal growth and development, normal energy intake. The red line, however, represents a similar mice, the genetic identical mice, receiving 5% less energy intake. It receives 95% energy intake, 5% less than it should have. So the brain perceives I'm getting too little energy during my growth and development, so I actually go into a mode where I actually use less energy on growth, development, immune function, activity, fertility, and so on. So I become able to deposit 40% more fat mass during growth and development. I'm repeating now. 5% less energy intake results in 40% more deposition of fat mass during growth and development. Why? Because the brain perceives I'm getting too little, so I'm adapting and going down in energy cost in all other physiological functions. This mechanism needs to be understood by everybody. So if you want to treat patients with diabetes, it is obvious we need to understand that the pancreas sessionate insulin going to the bloodstream and mediating glucose uptake in the muscle. And if you do not understand that, I would argue, please do not put your hands on patients living with diabetes. Would you agree? Thank you, because that's an obvious rhetorical truth. That's what everything is built on, knowledge. I argue the same thing with the patients living with obesity. If you do not know well enough about what system we are working here, I would not favor that you engage with them. This is another study showing the same principle. This is a normal mice in the bottom green panel. It's a normal mice receiving ad libitum food intake as much as it's like during the day. It's perfect life. Ad libitum food intake, it is not cake, but it is normal mice chow. So it develops a fat percentage of 9, which is normal for the mice. Full ad libitum food intake, 7 weeks, 9% fat mass. Everything is normal. Then we take the OB mice and give it ad libitum food intake, meaning 16, 17, 18 hours of food intake per day. It develops and establishes a fat mass of approximately 54%, more than half. 54% fat because it eats as much as it requires and deposits most of it as fat mass. This is just the OB mice. Now the ringing bell is start to ring, because then we take another OB mice, namely the blue line, and then we pair-fed it with the normal mice. And the normal mice only ate 4 or 5 hours per day, not 16, 17, 18. 4 to 5 hours per day food intake because we matched the OB blue line with the normal mice, green line, and what resulted was that it deposited 53% fat mass. Even though it ate so much less, it burned all its lean body mass, meaning muscles and bone, in order to preserve, actively deposit, maintain, preserve fat mass in the future. These are the mechanisms in what happens physiologically when the fat mass is threatened. So caloric restriction, in my point of view, is not really the way to go. Because why? Because it elicits a counter-adaptive response, and I would call it a planned defeat. We know we will lose. This mechanism can be explained in this. I'm sorry for its Danish. It's taken from a book that I wrote. Panel A, however, is easy to understand. Panel A is normality, normal fat mass, normal leptin going into the bloodstream, entering the hypothalamus in the brain, where the brain perceives you have normal leptin, so you have normal growth, development, metabolism, immunology, reproduction, activity, and a normal appetite. Everything is normal. Panel B, what the system was built for in billions of years, meaning very low fat mass, resulting in very low leptin concentration in the blood, entering the blood into the brain, the hypothalamus, where the hypothalamus perceives there's so little leptin, we must be starving, we lack fat, so now I become excessively hungry, and I reduce the cost to all the other physiological functions, meaning growth, development, reproduction, immunology, and so on. Which is ingenious. Why? Because then the body gets the ability to survive a few more days, weeks, in a climate where there's no food. This is what it's built for. Panel C, the world right now, people living with a high fat mass, obesity, a very high concentration of leptin in the blood, that only some of it enter into the brain, the hypothalamus. Why? Because the blood-brain barrier inhibits to some extent, which has been published. It's the first mechanism. So relatively little leptin gets into the brain, so the brain wrongly perceives I am lacking fat mass because the leptin concentration is low, so I develop a high hunger, super high appetite, and I diminish my activities in growth, reproduction, immunology, activity, and all temperature and all the other ones. Meaning that I'm continuously in a vicious cycle depositing fat mass. Panel D, the next mechanism, which is when leptin bind with the leptin receptor on the neuron, on the surface of the neuron in hypothalamus, they usually elicit the JAK-STAT pathway, which is capable and responsible for all the actions of leptin. But in people living with obesity who have a high fat mass, they also have a higher concentrations of SOX3, suppressors of cytokine signal 3. And SOX3 is inhibiting the JAK-STAT pathway. So now we have two established published mechanisms. One is less leptin gets into the brain, and that leptin that gets into the brain is further sabotaged by SOX3. Now we have a scenario where people with a high fat mass is really hungry. Not just something to just be a little less hungry, be motivated to eat less. No, thank you. That has nothing to do with patient's phenotype, nothing to do with the patient's behavior, nothing to do with understanding where the patient is. Nothing. Nothing. Instead, we should understand that the patient is more hungry that we probably do not understand. What kind of hunger I'm speaking about? A plane fell down in the 1970s in the Andes Mountains with a sports team. Some of you might remember. What did they do? Excuse me? They ate each other. Thank you very much. They ate one another. Did they want to eat each other when they boarded the plane? Do they think they had that is going to happen? No, this is extreme distress. But when you go there and you're enough hungry, you start eating your other comrades. That's what happened. Auschwitz, more brutal example. Second World War, eastern part of Poland. People starved to death. What did they do? They ate one another. I'm speaking about extreme hunger. What I'm saying to you now is that patients living with obesity has a hunger, maybe not that bad, but in that category that we do not understand. We do not understand the degree of hunger these patients are experiencing. So when we see a person, a man standing in McDonald's eating burgers, milkshakes, and fries, some people think, oh, this is a shame. How can he do it to himself? I will make you not think like that. I want you to think, this is a patient. He has a high degree of fat mass, probably also complications. He needs help. Why? Because none of us are responsible of what genes we are carrying. We are not responsible of the genetic combination at conception, which is obviously right. So we have a gene, all of us, that we managed to live with, but we didn't ask for them. So when people have genes that are more susceptible to developing high fat mass, it is actually not their own mistake. They are not to blame. They are not to shame. They are not to internalize blame and shame, because it's not their own fault. They need help, which is a totally other story. Fat mass regulation, when you really get to know that, it explains why thousands have studied secondary weight regain. Point one. I can make a 40-second short video explanation, which provides a lot of self-identification, especially to the mothers and fathers and parents and elderly children, adolescents. Why? Because it explains why it always has been so difficult, why I'm so hungry, and I have been so motivated, but it never succeeded, even though what people told me. We do not know as healthcare professionals what the challenge is individual in each patient. We have no idea. We need to investigate to find out. That's another scenario. And that's what we do with all the other diseases, all the other chronic diseases in childhood and adulthood. There's a huge variability in treatment response where you cannot compare one patient with the other. So please be humble, serious, and respectful to these patients, to these healthcare professionals, and to everybody who engages with children, adults, and adults having obesity, like schools, universities, educations, workplaces, everywhere. Why? Because it's not only stupid to discriminate and stigmatize, it is also scientifically wrong. And you are destroying life by it. Imagine a child being 2 years of age, growing up, meeting the surroundings in kindergarten and school or whatever. Oh, we don't want to play with you. Oh, you are fat. How big clothes are you wearing? You're not coming to my birthday. How do they internalize the response of what they're meeting from surroundings in order to develop their own personalities? Is that fair? That is really not fair. This is actually the reason why I've chosen this career, exactly this argument. The translation and impact of fat mass regulation is you need to do as much as possible from the very beginning. Day one, you do 25 things, which is disqualifying small steps approaches. And I can make an analogy that might provide insight. If you imagine the Amazon River, very big river, probably 100,000 tributaries, and you have the thought experience, I would like to stop the water flow at the sea level when it's going into the sea. I'd like to stop it. No water running. How does it help to stop 10,000 tributaries out of 100,000? Nearly nothing. 50,000 out of 100,000, a little bit, water will still flow. When do we succeed? When they all stopped. What am I speaking about? I'm speaking about a system, a fat mass and energy regulated system that is integrative in nature, not reductionistic. It's integrative in nature. You need to do everything, otherwise the brain, the body is built to make adaptations to bypass what is going on. That's what you're dealing with. So my point of view now, small steps approaches is out, caloric restriction is out, and motivation is out, because it has nothing to do with these three things. And I like to bear all in your mind when I'm that provocative, sorry, but I am. But what have helped in the last 70 years? We have 70 years of evidence nothing has worked all over the world. Einstein said, it's only a fool who thinks something that doesn't work in the future. He said that precisely. And that's exactly what's at stake here. So I don't want just nutrition and activity. I want nutrition, I want fibers, I want carbohydrates, I want proteins, I want fat, I want breakfast, lunch, afternoon, dinner, I want picky eating, I want sugar dependency, I want racing border children and compromises and conflicts, when to say no to sweets and so on. I want disturbed eating, I want genetic risk to be integrated in this equation. I want everything, because that's the only way we're going to succeed with this. Caloric restriction through growth and development. And just this argument is stupid. Growth and development is characterized by a body who is growing up and being bigger. How could you ever perform caloric restriction over a longer time period? It's just not working. Under-eating, every patient's under-eat. If I ask you, all of you, very comprehensive questionnaires, you would probably also under-report. And what happens when you under-report and you try to under-eat? This system kicks in. So both under-eating is actually a planned defeat, because then the system will take over and you will lose, but also under-reporting because it's really complex what we're discussing here. It's difficult to remember things. So what am I saying? I'm not saying it is the patient's fault they're under-reporting. I'm saying it's my responsibility to make the patient aware of what she is doing by thorough questionnaires and repeating questions in order to know what's exactly going on at breakfast, lunch, afternoon, dinner, and before going to bed. It's my responsibility. And the patient, if I think they're lying, because under-reporting is actually lying, and how does it then go with the patient-healthcare relationship? Not well. Why? Because the patient has been through this life all their life, and they feel when they're not believed. So that is a perfect way to undermine your relationship with the patient. Motivation is totally out of the question, of many reasons. I can speak a long time about that. It has nothing to do with motivation. And I'll actually show you a little later that if you go down the motivational context, you directly put shame, blame, and internalized shame, blame on the patient. I'm just not a little bit critical, I'm very critical. So, Convention of the Right of the Child is formulated by UNICEF, but also the United Nations. I included all those considerations because I wanted the best for the child with obesity, meaning eating, activity, school attendance, no bullying, and sleeping well, which are the fundamental rights in general. I want the same thing with children, adolescents, and adults living with obesity. So pediatricians should secure optimal growth, development, and mental, physical, and social thriving. That's our job description. And obesity is, in my point of view, that disease that is destroying children, adolescents the most in the world right now. Billions of people are affected, and they are relatively neglected in all healthcare systems around the world. Even in Denmark, where I'm coming from, we have our clinic, it's working. We are taking 5,000 children into treatment. I have trained another 50, 60 clinics who are maybe taking another few thousand patients in, but we have 200,000 patients. We're not there yet, not even close. So this is an enormous challenge. The American Academy of Pediatrics said, stop watchful waiting, meaning not just see what happens tomorrow or in 3 years. Please do not. Why? Because those who are genetically susceptible will develop much more fat mass in 2-3 years and then become more difficult to treat. So do something now. Act now. I think that's the most important statement they made in that. The Children's Obesity Clinic was established more than 15 years ago with an age span of 3 to 22 years, including transition, with a BMI above the 99th percentile for age and gender. And I was very firmly saying no selection criteria. If you go into most international studies, especially randomized controlled studies, they have a long range of selection criteria. What does that mean? That means that we are going away from daily clinical practice. I'm speaking about schizophrenia, I'm speaking about leukemia, I'm speaking about ADHD and autism in various spectral degrees. I'm speaking of hundreds of diseases that are coming to our clinics from all over the country. And they are more difficult to treat. This is the Holbaek model, said very briefly shortly. It's a 360-degree, family-based, holistic way of thinking where we do everything. This is Convention of the Right of the Child. This is fat mass regulation, adaptations to avoid reductions in fat mass physiologically. So we're doing everything. We have a questionnaire composed of 160 questions that we go through in 14 minutes. I think I'll come back to that one. That was another hanging provocative statement. 160 questions in 14 minutes. Well, I'll start a little bit now. If I don't get the answers I want, 160 questions in terms of frequencies, amount, and qualities of intake, what can I then not do? I cannot make a treatment plan. So if I do not want to ask all these questions because it's too comprehensive, I just rhetorically ask, who's paying the price for that? The patient. So our healthcare professional ideas of what is good and it is impacting directly how the patients are treated. This is a little bit too positive in my way due to budget restraints and stuff like that. But we see the patient the first 12 months at the top left approximately 3, 4, or 5 times. When patients are more difficult to treat, we see them a little bit more often. We might refer to a psychologist or family counselor, but we usually see them 3, 4 times. Year 2, 12 to 24 months, we see them 1, 2 times when it goes well. Why see them more? No reason to. I see a lot of patients annually. Why? Because they're adapted to the treatment plan and they're going well during growth and development. I just control them a little bit here and there, DEXA scan, blood samples, so on. Those that are more difficult, especially those with single gene mutations or syndromes, we see more often, obviously. So what do? We concentrate on those patients who are more difficult to treat, like we do in any other chronic disease. This primary, secondary, and tertiary sector thinking is exactly what we're doing. We're having routinely taken height, weight, waist, and hip, etc., blood pressure, questionnaires in terms of quality of life, biomarkers, where we're pretty extensive, and body composition, but also in many places MR spectroscopy, where we're evaluating fat mass percentages. The communication I'm speaking about, I want it to be neutral, a neutral communication, not positive. I don't want a positive, oh, how are you? So nice to see you. How are your husband? I don't want that. Why do you not want that? Because it's inauthentic. It's fundamentally inauthentic. You can be sweet people and you may smile and you can do what you are. I'm not speaking about that. That's totally allowed. Be who you are, please. I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about being neutral. Please take a break, close your eyes. All of you, I mean it. Close your eyes and think about your best friend and the last time you spoke with her or him. Think about the last time you were together with your best friend and how your intonation in your voice were with your best friend. Thank you very much. You are probably a little bit insecure how you actually spoke because it's so obvious what you're doing with your best friend. My argument will be that you actually spoke neutrally. How are you? And you are not going into a positive mode. You are not saying, oh, how nice to see you, how beautiful red shoes. Then she will answer immediately, are you going to borrow any money right now? Please think again. Please think again. With your best friend, I'm saying you're speaking neutrally. Because this is your best friend. This is somebody you have chosen out through life. Out of hundreds of other potential persons, you've chosen that person as your best friend. You know her or him. You know the values. You know how they react to a certain extent. Then you know they will tell you the truth when you have something which is difficult to speak about. So you speak neutrally. Or neutrally for you, I can say. So why do we speak with a more positive voice to somebody we don't know? In order to build an alliance. But street credentials, being street smart, everybody knows how long time it takes to evaluate another person, in between 1 to 4 seconds. So if you try to engage with a person you do not know and being positive with somebody you don't know, who has other values, a natural normality or way of seeing life, that is bound to be a disaster. They usually tend to accept you anyway. But if you're speaking positively, it then becomes more difficult to say no. Stop smoking. Fast food 1 monthly. Because if you're in the positive mode where you're engaging and building alliances, it's very difficult to doing that. And I can make an example. Can I use you for just one question? Is that all right? Okay. I will just repeat what you're saying in terms of the microphone. So I'll just ask you 2 or 3 small questions. How often do you eat breakfast? Every day. How often do you eat fast food? And now you say 10 times. 10 times. You see, how often do you eat breakfast? Every day. How often do you eat fast food? 10 times. If I'm positive in alliance, I need to respond to 10 times. I cannot just go by it because my positivity has involved me to engage in your response. If I'm instead saying, how often do you eat breakfast? Every day. How often do you eat fast food? 10 times. How often do you eat sugar? 17 times. How often do you drink lemonade? 200 times. You see, what happens now is I just continue. I do not hesitate. Fast food 10 times. Oh, that is too much. Oh, are you sure that's a good idea? Where do you buy it? You see, that doesn't work. If I'm just totally neutral in voice, I can ask my question, I can get the answers, and I can continue. And what do I learn you right now? I learn you can tell me anything. There's no repercussions. Oh, how nice of you. How often are you eating fast food? 10 times. Oh, my God. You see, that's my point. You're expressing your own thing, and that is not working. You need to be neutral. So by being neutral, you can ask more difficult questions. How often do you take cocaine? 3 times. How often do you take heroin? Twice. I can go into questions like that and not hesitate because I can be authentic who I am and say yes or no. If I'm too positive in my voicing, I cannot say, it's very difficult to say no because I've just said to you indirectly that we have a very positive relationship and it is not nice to say no to you. You see? But there's another connotation to this. If you're having a relationship with a patient over 5 months and you're very positive, you learn the patient you're very positive, the weight is going down, the patient is very happy, everything is good. Then fat mass kicks in together with compliance and the patient gains 7 kilograms. What do you think the patient will expect from you when you have a secondary weight regain? If you were that positive when anything was positive, You should actually, if you were authentic, being a little bit negative when things went the other way around. That was not good. Nobody wants to go to a healthcare professional and being met by that way. By being neutral, you can be everywhere at all times, and they know you're neutral. There's a very beautiful part of being, but you need to be taught. I had a nurse helping me teaching back in the day. She said, what Jens Christian is speaking about right now about neutrality is actually very difficult. But when you go there, you become excellent, and you can speak about everything. Sexual abuse. And you are not reacting in a way that is actually pushing the patient away because it's over-considerate. You can actually speak about very difficult things, divorces, because you are there authentically. That's a very big difference. This is one of the key reasons why the system is very strong. When I ask 160 questions relatively quickly, I call it flow and rhythm. I try to impersonate your relationship with your best friend, because with your best friend, you're speaking duk, 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 duk. Questions are asked and answered. Duk, 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 duk. Why? Because you love one another. Why? Because you have no resistance to one another. Because you know one another. So that is a perfect dialogue in my point of view. When you meet another person you do not like and start asking a sensitive question, how do you take cocaine? Then it's very usual that the patient stops a little bit up and evaluate, am I going to answer that, or what is the repercussions? Am I taking my children away if I'm answering it truthfully? So there's no response immediately. So it's a pause. It teaches me immediately, this was not an easy question. I do not react, but I invest in my brain. Here's some hesitation. Here's some excusing. Here's some explanations. Here's some irony in the response patterns. Here's some sarcasm, which all express resistance. Resistance, why is that important? Because it's telling me as a healthcare professional that there's something difficult here right now. In 14 minutes. These are the fundamentals. I want a focused pedagogy where the healthcare professionals enact a true empathy and not something based on your perceptions or normality, which is always different from the normality of perceptions or values from the patients. They're always separate. I want a wider healthcare professional responsibility to take orders, to take care of the children and all patients you meet. I want to initiate 10 to 25, 35 treatment plan points from the beginning. And I want it to be interactive during development development, where parental participation is interacting with the child's age and milestones and development stage. There's direct and indirect effects here. If you take away high-fat milk, if you take a proportion away of fast food, if you take 8 hours of television and computer time away where you reduce inactivity, these are positive direct effects. Positive direct effects. But if you're having a treatment plan point with 21 plan points to a mother who's relatively insecure border setting because she hasn't learned it from her own mother, and then you have a lot of conflicts every day because the child says, I want a wine gum. She says, no. I want a wine gum. No. I want a wine gum. Okay, then we have peace in the afternoon. If the child learns that there is a yes sometimes, you keep up the pressure of conflicts. If there's a clear, straight no always, the child resigns and realizes this is a no. What I'm speaking about children learning what is up and down, right and wrong during childhood. Children are programmed to push borders, to realize and learn borders. That's what I'm speaking about here. This is why it's so important. So a mother in this situation receiving a treatment plan point, 25 points, the best for the child, morning, lunch, afternoon, dinner, television time, computer time, sweets, snacking, fast food, and unorganized sports, picky eating, everything. She actually has a driver's manual of how to take care of your child. We never say that, but that's what we're doing. So the indirect effect is we are stabilizing the mother-child relationship. A very, very important point of action, and actually another one of our really important reasons why this works as well. This is the dynamics of obesity, of management of obesity, that is so important. If you imagine the point 19 top left and see that is a treatment standpoint of 19 points. When I started out that more than 10 years ago, my own staff said, no thank you, Jens Christian, no thank you. Nurses and dietitians and others, no thank you. And I told them, totally all right, you do what you do, I do what I do. What happened was, I started out with 19 points, everybody thinks that is totally impossible, he's gone crazy. but there's something called fat mass regulation. 19 plat pumps. What did they realize within 6 months? They realized, my staff, that 75% of patients accepted approximately 75% of the plan points, meaning that 19 turns into 14 okay, 5 is not okay, meaning that I, in one consultation, 45 minutes, has shown what is easy for the family and what is difficult for the family. One consultation. Meaning that those 5 points that are difficult, we are continuing and focusing on them, which is difficult like we do in any other chronic disease. Patients, diminished degree obesity, become very happy. Then they lose track of everything because now I lost my goal and everything is beautiful. Thank you very much, Christian. Then they go, well, this with the treatment plan, they relatively quickly gain 10 kilograms, become really sad. What happens then? Try to imagine if you replace the 19 with motivation, 14 words. It is important you're motivated to eat less, move more. Try to imagine you're losing weight, becoming happy, regaining 8 kilograms, being sad. And what do you think the patient will realize in connection what the healthcare professional said at the first meeting? She said, it's important that you are motivated to eat less, move more. What does the patient realize then? I have not been motivated enough. I am to blame. I failed the very sweet healthcare professional. I was a loser. This is building direct shame, blame upon the patient. And I can ask rhetorically, is that optimal? It is not optimal. Why? Because nothing to do with motivation. It has to do with neuroendocrinology, fat mass regulation. After the patient becoming sad, they are challenged due to suffering in their life. It can be stretch marks, it can be bullying, it can be isolation, loneliness, a lot of things that is really challenging the patients. And then they realize, oh, that treatment plan that actually makes sense. It was meaningful and relevant, so they re-enter into it. But now the treatment plan is not governed by a healthcare professional, it is governed by the patient. A transformation of treatment responsibility from me to them, which we do in any other chronic disease. Leukemia, learn how to do whatever, asthma, avoid allergies and smoking, etc., etc., etc. Same thing. This has gone into this cycle of communication, we can call it, where we start at the top, person living with obesity, where we explain the fat mass. It takes 40 seconds. It gives self-identification, meaning that the patient thinks, oh my God, this healthcare professional actually knows what she is talking about. Question and answers, 160 questions in 14 minutes. Questions, frequency, amounts, and qualities of everything of importance about this child, this family. Those answers indirectly make pattern recognition of curling, neglect, or how the child is actually taken care of, if the clothes is dirty, if there's no food in the food box in school, etc., etc., etc. We devise a treatment plan, the patient respond to the treatment plan. Something is totally unrealistic. My child do not like rye bread. My child want ketchup every day. They do not eat brown rice, they want to have white rice. When the mother says with very high degree of confidence, my child do not eat brown rice. My child have never eaten rye bread. Why is that wrong by definition? As we know as pediatricians and related personnel, why is that wrong by definition? Because the mother has not really understood that growth and development means something from 0 to 18 years of age, which is governed with milestones where children learn new things all the time. So if you're a very picky eater and don't like rye bread, that is maybe the truth for the last 11 years. But when something gets important enough, meaning I would like to lose weight for any price possible, and if that's what I'm going to do, eat rye bread at breakfast or lunch, no problem. So many times, mother said with high confidence, he does not eat rye bread, and then the child said, I can eat rye bread. I do it with my friends sometimes, mother. So when you assume the mother is right, you are wrong. So you need to be able to say, no, that is actually not true. We will try to build for a better future where we actually try to follow this treatment schedule. Otherwise, it will be really difficult. Why? Because otherwise the fat mass will actively preserve fat mass and you'll never succeed. It's not built on my political agenda. It's not built on my anything. It's built upon the physiological insight of fat mass regulation, which is a very, very hardcore opponent. Really respect about that. Resistance is governed with things that is not nice. We modulate resistance, transformation into a perspective so they can master their own perspective, which is the whole idea. It's relatively self-governing, this system. That's also a part of the reason why it's so strong. So when you treat 1,000 patients, they will have very various response patterns. If you treat 1,000 patients with COVID-19 or Ebola or breast cancer or epilepsy or whatever, it is always, you can see a heterogeneity in responses. For something very light disease course to somebody really severe disease course, intensive department and maybe death. So it's just how it is. The Holbaek model is based on obesity as a chronic, serious, progressive, and recurrent disease. Fat mass regulation is center stone in this. The fat mass is actively defended. So when somebody would like to make a compromise, what do you think? The fat mass is actually defended. Any compromise would lead to a relatively increase in fat mass. And my rhetoric question is, who paid the price? The child. Not the mother, not the healthcare professional, the child. And this is one of the strongest insights within the model because that really makes healthcare professionals go through it with no compromise. You can make compromise if you want to. Just remember, bear in mind, who's paying the price. I had a nurse, healthcare nurse, who was having a conversation in the beginning with a mother just before summer holiday. And after 1 hour, the mother said, couldn't we just wait after summer holiday? And the nurse got a little bit soft and said, okay. And then at the car home, then the nurse said, oh my God, that was wrong. And then she called the mother, and then the mother answered, no, we are starting immediately. Because you can see 2 adult women are agreeing about something, but who's paying the price? Always. Always. And I'm not speaking about obesity. I'm speaking about obesity and 243 complications. The best for the child, communication and pedagogy. I've just shown you a few examples today. Not comprehensively, just examples. The Holbaek study is another thing that I developed together with Professor Torben Hansen. We have nearly 10,000 children. We have genetics, we have lipidomics, proteomics, microbiome. We have a lot of studies doing a lot of interesting things with a lot of PhD students. We have a huge group, you could call it. We are publishing the highest papers right now. We build it over the years like this. It's not really interesting, but it's just we have a lot of children with and we have a lot of children without obesity. From this study, we published that 75% exhibit low self-esteem, self-confidence, and quality of life. 75%. Is that in harmony with normal growth and development and mental thriving? No, it is not. 82, now 86% exhibited disturbed eating. 50% exhibited borderline overt hypertension. 28% dyslipidemia. 60% vitamin D insufficiency. 14, now 18% prediabetes, 45% sleep apnea, and 31, now 38% fatty liver. Fatty liver, prediabetes, dyslipidemia, elevated blood pressure, hypertension is leading directly to later coming in cardiovascular disease. We know that from the Berger-Loser and the Framingham heart studies. We know it. It's not just something we might consider. We know it. So in my point of view, this is the imperative how, why to help children, because they are so burdened with obesity, and these measurements has been taken at the first consultation at our clinic. So these are thousands of children with an average age of 11.5 years of age showing this. Unacceptable in a pediatric perspective. The model has shown more than 30 papers, thank you very much, Anne-Marie, that we're able to decrease the degree of obesity in approximately 75% of patients, but actually up to 90%. I'll come back to that. We use 4 to 5 hours healthcare professional time per patient per year. We reduce simultaneously the degree of dyslipidemia, hypertension, hepatic steatosis, parental degree of obesity. We reduce appetite and bullying in both hospitals and municipalities all over the country. We increase quality of life and body self-esteem. We are independent of genetic risk score. There's a paper just coming out showing that we reduce the inflammatory status, just shown, independent of social class, degree of obesity, disturbed eating, and several other things. I'd like to go into a few cases. This is Tom. The name was not Tom. He was 15 years of age. He had a BMI of 42. He had a high degree of obesity in the family. He had 4 near siblings and three siblings, with type 2 diabetes. Mother was on early retirement, meaning relatively low income class in Denmark. Father worked at a factory. Present height 192 centimeters, weight 155 kilograms. Body fat percentage of 55.5%, very high percentage. Birth weight normal. School education, special class due to dyslexia. Heavy bullied, changed in school several times for only a few friends. He was gaming 5 hours per day before coming to us. Physical activity, he walked to school a couple of kilometers each way. His blood, when you put BMI 42 into this, then please go to the left where the boy, and you find 15 years of age. You find 15 at the bottom, you go up, and then you see that the graph stops at 32. You need to go another 10 units up. That's actually top of the scale. Abnormal blood samples showing abnormalities in liver, insulin, and vitamin D status plus HDL. Treatment plan point with breakfast, lunch, I will not go through it precisely, but all the meals, not that, instead of that. When we say not that, as an example, plan point 1, white bread, bun, Cheerios, chocolate, 1, it's because he has answered that. So this treatment plan point is highly individually designed. It's tailor-made. So all no's is because they reported it. All the do's, number 2, breakfast, you can choose between oats or oatmeal porridge with a maximum of 1 teaspoon of raisins sugar per person, puffed rye or oat grains, rye bread with lean toppings, maximum of 10% fat, maximum 17% cheese, plain yogurt with a maximum of 0.5% fat, maximum 4 eggs per week, this is wrong, skim milk, low-fat milk, etc. So that's what those are the alternatives the family can choose about in the next 10 years to come. And so it goes all through the fast food number 10, once monthly, screen time in favor of exercise 16, 2 hours organized sports a day, etc., etc. Psychosocial, he almost became ill when people complimented with his result. He was sad, lonely, worrying, inclined to weep. The mother also lost weight. He contemplated suicide. He did not consider himself as being important because he had lived a life under those circumstances. He had a great difficulty in sensing himself. Patients who have very high weight usually cut the feeling of everything south of the head. Sometimes his body shakes, probably old trauma, probably anxiety. Father says his son is more important than his job. He was allocated a support person, psychologist, and over the next 1.5 years, he lost his weight from 155 to 113 with no medical treatment, no pharmaceutical treatment. This is just a treatment plan point. Everything around the child was taken care of because the father stepped in and made sure everything was done. Why? Because the situation was desperate. The situation was mentally desperate for this boy, and the father knew it, so he did everything. So rye bread now become a little bit secondary. And so does a lot of other things. This system is based in the Danish clinical pediatric guidelines, just repeated, you could say, in May 2024. We are European Center of Management. We received the award for the best national training program in Europe for some years ago. And these are some of the articles. I will go through them very quickly. This is like background music. This is the first time in 2011 where we've shown 75% of children reduced their degree of obesity, 4.5 hours per health professional time per patient per year. This study is having more than 2,400 patients. We are showing it is independent on antiemetics at birth, birth weight, birth length. Similar patterns, 75% reduced their degree of obesity. This is the system taken into 8 municipalities across Denmark. 75% reduced their degree of obesity using 4.5 hours per patient per year. Shown here in 1,000 patients. This is another study taking the system into another pediatric department, 75% of weight loss, 4.5 hours per healthcare professional time per year. This is approximately 300 patients. This is our first study in dyslipidemia some years ago, where we changed everything beneficially, significantly. This is the 90% study. At this study, we took anthropometrics, we took blood samples, we took DEXA scan at baseline, and then we repeated the whole thing after 18 months in average, some before, some later. In average, 18 months, anthropometrics, DEXA, blood sample here, and after 18 months, 90% of patients exhibited even a lower fat mass, an increased muscle mass, a reduced BMI, reduced cholesterol, some combination of what I would call positive effect. Reductions in hepatic steatosis shown in several studies. We have had 2 PhD studies. We probably have 7 publications about it. It was then 31, now it's 38 now. Reduced 76 of them. Blood pressure in the hospital, blood pressure in the municipalities reduced. Sleep apnea reduced. Quality of life in the community-based study improved. Subjective evaluation of your own quality of life, mood, body self-esteem by the patients, more than 1,200 patients actually, showed that quality of life was improved, mood was improved, appetite was reduced, bullying was reduced, motivation was reduced, and body satisfaction was improved. Disturbed eating, no influence in treatment. Genetic risk or no influence. This is the digital system. 940 adult women using the system, subscription-based. BMI reduced 0.63. Increase in physical activity. This is a simultaneous meta-analysis with less patients, 792 in 12 studies. Reduced BMI 0.45, no increase in physical activity. Improve all these indices significantly. This is after 2 consultations, 71% reduced at obesity, and this is only online. There's no dietitians, there's no nurses, there's no doctors, there's nothing here. Only web application online, the patient with themselves. 71% after 2 consultations, up to 85% with up to 5 consultations. This is just a beautiful study showing some genetic effect between the mother and the child, which show tendencies towards cardiovascular disease. And I have a lot of other studies, now I'll go really quickly. MC4 receptor mutations treated with GLP-1 positively. Again here, homozygously. Usually you see treatment effects after 2 years. You expect this, but we're about to publish this up to 7 years afterwards. Why? Because we train patients and educate them what to do, like any other chronic patient. We actually see fat-free gains, increases in muscle mass in the Holbaek model, that actually exceed what you would expect during growth and development. And when you think about semaglutide, we know that it actually is reducing lean body mass. And we have a setup of how to do it, where we DEXA scan and actually follow the patient's response patterns, especially with body compositions. So who should start on? We only treat 7% of our 1,000 patients with semaglutide. 93% is treated non-pharmacologically. So those that are difficult to treat, single gene mutations, syndromes, severe complications, specific diagnoses, are treated. This is the study showing that if you have treatment with semaglutide, they lose 17 kilograms, but 7 of those 17 kilograms is actually muscle mass. It's quite a lot. Yeah, we can just bring this. I think we're very close. Differentiation of patients onwards. I want to evaluate treatment response immediately and heterogeneity, integrate psychosocial interactions, obviously. Do a lot of other things that we're in the way to do. And we only use pharmacotherapy to select a few patients into what I would call personalized medicine. And I would like to respect for patients, healthcare professionals, and everybody around them. Because we have been living too long a time where we think that there's something wrong about these patients, and it's only been the patients paying the price for that misconception. It must stop now. So, yeah, this is just more studies. I think I'm very close that we're going into a question. If you have some questions, I think. Any questions? Any questions, marks of everything? It could also be for somebody on us virtually. Yes, please. And you need a microphone. Oh, there's also a microphone over there. We need to speak in a microphone due to the, yes, please. Yeah. It's brought. Arrived.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask, like, it's fascinating, and the model, it's very interesting for me to learn. I'm a dietitian. How would you suggest that we go forward, like looking at this practically? Like, how would we be able to implement this in practice with our patients?
In South Africa?
Yes.
Yes. It is relatively simple. It just needs the decision to do so and the will to do it, and a little bit of money as well. It's not totally free. But I train healthcare professionals. I've been training more than 1,000 in Denmark, Norway, Faroe Islands, and other places. And when I train them 2 days, 6 months pause, where they have patients, and another 2 days, 6 months pause, another 2 days, 6 days in total, they are equipped to use this system, also in cumulative and pedagogic styles. So that it takes that training, you could say. After the first course of 2 days, you're actually able to use the digital system and just go on starting. So it actually takes 2 days. But the pediatricians probably, and maybe some other people, may need to think this is a good idea to promote it, because otherwise it will be very difficult. But if you think that you train a group of people, being pediatricians, nurses, or dietitians, that they could work, and they got access to the system, then the system is actually fundamentally very scalable and actually very cheap. I'm speaking about $10, $20 per patient per year, actually, after the initial investment, which is nothing. In Denmark, it costs €5,000 to pay to treat a patient with semaglutide for 1 year. €5,000. So I'm speaking about nearly nothing, and I'm also sensitive to very poor people. So training, and then you can actually start. But there's some things that need to be arranged, and I'm very strict that healthcare professional needs to be trained, because I've been training 1,000, and I've seen so much how difficult it is to go away from traditional belief systems, like small steps approaches, motivation, underreporting, all these things. And they are actually difficult to get rid of. It's also difficult to start speaking really neutrally, because we have such a deep feeling like to do good. So it's actually a bit difficult to withdraw a little bit and just be professional. If you consider clinics in oncology and heart disease where people are dying, they're dying of heart failure, they're dying of step 4 cancers, and try to imagine how the healthcare professionals are speaking. They're actually speaking the exact way I want. Why? Because they know that patient may be dead in 2 days and still need to speak with the wife. That's actually the platform I want. It's professional, it's neutral, it's correct, it's informative, it's perfect. Because when you go into the other thing, which is very cultural-based and narrative-based, then you are very quickly interacting with the bias this patient family has been living for many years. And even you are sweet, you will not get bullied here. You're reminding about what have happened. And you're actually having a little bit of superficial attitude. What I just said was really stupid. But if you're trying to cope with it with one another, what you're trying to do is actually often making it worse. So just being neutral is much better than they can say to you what is wrong. So that was a fast answer. Yes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just wanted to ask with regard to the intervention. My name is Simon Shavangu. I'm a dietitian. I just wanted to know, at primary health care, the module, how can we best put it into South African context, especially with our lot of challenges that we have.
Yes.
Especially because I could tell that in most of the obesity, it is linked to the brain. So how can we change the mentality of community in order for us to try and
we have done quite a bit of that, not all of it, and not entirely at all, but we've done some of that in Denmark. And I would argue it will probably take you 40 years at least to have a transformation in South Africa where you actually obtain what you're speaking about. What I just answered here is actually what I think you should do in primary practice as well. It's very important to be sensitive in many ways. So you should never just say, oh, you have obesity, I can help you. You should say something like, we have a program with obesity. If you're interested, we can use it. Because we need to bear in mind very clearly that I want the Hippocratic Oath. What does that mean? That means that the patient asks for help. So in primary care, you see patients with a lot of other diseases and conditions. So please do not attack them with obesity. Just ask very suddenly, it's easy going. Just, we have this program that might help you if you're interested. That's the only thing you need to ask. But not go more after the patient, because then they feel like not nice. So it's really important to be neutral and just state we have this program. If you're interested, go home and think about it. So they're not really attacked when they're coming from other conditions. That's very important, to respect the autonomy of the patient. That's very important. But about what you're also speaking about, you're speaking about things that I don't know anything about, like South African cultural habits. Well, a lot of them I don't know. The only thing I do know is that, and that actually is more important, I do know that the values I'm speaking about, obesity is a disease, fat mass regulation, and the best for the child, are universal values everywhere. I know for certain that children here develop complications, obesity disease. I know for certain fat mass is actually preserved. And I know for certain that parents, mother and fathers would like to take care of the children, but many of them have difficulty in doing so. So what I want us to do is to equip the parents to do it better. Not by saying you're a bad mother, but just say, this system will help you, it benefits your child, and then there's a lot of inbuilt assistance in terms of how you construct the 24 hours daily life, etc., etc., etc. Then you comes into cultural habits about being rich might now mean that I can do what I want to, eat a lot of fast food, drink a lot of Coca-Cola, then gaining weight, but I'm rich, everybody can see it. That's a narrative that I've heard about that is very often in other cultures as well. We need to understand that obesity is not necessarily being rich. That is what I call education. That takes time. But actually, the reason why I'm so certain in my answering is because that I know very clearly about the degree of suffering within the patients. I know very certainly about the suffering within the boys and girls and the mothers and fathers. And that is what's driving it. That is the suffering in the patients, in the parents, that will drive the change. You will say a lot of correct things, but you will not drive it. It will be them coming for help, them coming for assistance in order to alleviate their suffering that will drive this train of change, transformation in South Africa. I think that will be my answer. Thank you very much. No, I thought it was a hand, but it was, yeah, it was a hand, yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Veronica. I'm also a dietitian. I just wanted to find out the model that you discussed. Can we use it for kids that are also younger? So we see a lot of kids between 0 and 2 years, and then the weight for height is above the 3 SD, standard deviation. So in that case, we also think about breastfeeding, formula feeding, all of those types of things. But what I've seen as well is that for under 2 years, they might be obese classified, but then at 3, 4, 5 years, now suddenly they're these skinny kids, normal BMI, with limited intervention from our side. So would it be beneficial to start this model like from a younger age, under 2 years already, or do we kind of wait and see at 4 or 5 years before we start with this specific intervention?
That's a very, very good question. And my answer is yes and no. And then I'll try to elaborate on that. But first of all, our clinic starts usually at 3 years of age, because the first 36 months are more complex in terms of growth and development. There's a lot of things to take care of, but the child is moving around, standing up, starts to going, where they usually diminish their degree of fat mass in that process. There's things there. It's also very complex growth patterns that makes it difficult to understand. So we are starting later, unless we have a child 12 months of 22 kilograms, which is totally off the chart due to single gene mutations. Then we start. But we need to be very respectful about the early growth patterns, point one. But again, I disagree. Why? Because some people close to me saying, Jens Christian, This is ad libitum-based system. There's no food restriction. This is ad libitum-based. And all children in the world, no matter the degree of obesity, even if they're skinny, benefit from having a regular good breakfast, lunch, afternoon, dinner, and regulated fast food, snacks, sweets, lemonade, soda, etc., and regulated access to television, computer usage, and organized sports and sports considerations. All children will benefit from that. So if you rephrase it a little bit, you could actually start with all patients, all children receiving it relatively early, not as a treatment of obesity, but as a stimulation and encouragement how to take best care of your child. So if you understand that system where it's not treatment of obesity, you can actually use it very early on. Because what I said before about how many young parents that are pretty insecure is really a world phenomenon. And it's actually sad that a lot of parents are not totally in sync with the age of their child and what you can expect in terms of milestones. So in Denmark right now, we have a commission saying parents are curling their children too much. They're giving them too much responsibility. They are saying these children are more important than other children, actually creating a lot of secondary problems due to spoiled raising or curling, because parents are telling the children that you are more important. Actually, they are not when they go into reality. So there's a lot of considerations there where this could actually help to sink in the parents with the age of the child. Many parents think that small children who are not capable to make decision-making in terms of what we're going to eat to dinner like when they're age 4 are trying to involve them, and they create a lot of secondary problems when they give a child too much emphasis, too much decision-making power, and actually blend in a little child in decision-making in the family, which is totally off in terms of growth and development and intellectual development of the child. So there's a lot of interactive arguments here that I think is really important and really interesting. And the only thing I want to is that our children tomorrow are better off in any aspect. So I think it could work like that. I've had that idea for quite some time, but that needs the next step, so to say. But that's actually a little bit about the transformation, because it is really simple. The treatment plan is really easy to make. And and we have seen so many times how much it's been. I can give you another example of a beautiful secondary effect, which is beautiful. We had a television documentary in Denmark. I gave the treatment plan point. Point number 17 was bicycle in school. But that really was a problem. Why? Because he was born 27 weeks of gestation, 13 weeks too early. His birth weight was 735 grams, meaning he was born much too early, so the mother thought he should die. So she had like an anxiety reaction at birth, and I reactivated it when he was 13 years of age when I said bicycle to school. So she stood up in her own living room telling the camera people, I'm so sorry, but I have a great difficulty of allowing my son to bicycle to school because I'm so afraid he's going to die. And I would never have known that it was not for the television documentary. But what happens is these borders, these treatment plan points interact with the family dynamics and actually find what is not optimal here and actually emphasize them and actually correct the course, you could say. Not people doing anything wrong, just in order to optimize the best for your child. There's a lot of inbuilt things here that is really beautiful when used correctly. That's the reason why I want the training. Because this is very sensitive matters we're speaking about. Highly sensitive matters. So if we're saying anything wrong now, it's catastrophic. That's the reason why I want to train. A few, maybe a last, otherwise I can speak for myself. I can continue. I hope this was joyful. I hope that it was inspiring. I hope you had some... I hope it paved the way for a few thoughts. Thank you very much.